Hi there, I'm Dr. Myrdalis Diaz-Ramirez, and this is the Design Your Physician Life podcast. Welcome to this episode brought to you by our Maxillor Mastermind, which is an exclusive mastermind for physicians who want to learn about entrepreneurship. It's the personal and professional development program that you'd like to join. Today, we have a very special guest, Dr. Ryan Stegink from MedEdWell. He teaches physicians efficiencies on charting, and he has his podcast, MedEdWell. We have a great conversation with Dr. Stegink about intentional tools for pursuing wellness. Are you ready? Let's go.
Welcome to the Design Your Physician Life podcast, where you will get excited about being a physician, learn the tools that can help boost your success, and great tips from successful doctors. Join us to unlock the keys to an amazing physician life. And now, here's your host, Dr. Myrdalis Diaz-Ramirez.
Hey guys, welcome to this episode. Today, we're very excited to have Dr. Ryan Stegink. He has always been curious about how the world works, majoring in physics before going to medical school. Dr. Stegink now works as an outpatient general pediatrician, and he enjoys caring for patients from all over the world. He also enjoys encouraging colleagues and trainees, having been through burnout himself less than a year out of training. Part of Dr. Stegink's path throughout burnout included optimizing his own charting and practice workflows, and he now coaches other physicians to help them finish their charting and go home faster to be present for what matters most to them. He also has a podcast, MedEdWell, and I was his episode number 46. So if you guys want to go back, listen to that. Welcome. Thank you for being here, fellow podcaster.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, well, I'm very excited to have you. I was a guest and I had tons of fun in your podcast. And, I love pediatricians. I think everybody will remember their pediatrician. And I don't know if you have had the opportunity to listen to my first podcast, but I really talked a lot about my pediatrician and how I imagined his life would have been. And he was an entrepreneur. And right now, here you are, you're a pediatrician. And I want to learn all about like your life as a pediatrician. Give us some tips about that transition into entrepreneurship. And let's start with younger Ryan. Who was the Ryan who decided to become a physician? Like you went to physics, so physics, physician, pediatrician. Anyways, tell us about, was that a little boy? Was it a teenager? Was it in college? What took you to medicine?
Yeah. So when I was younger, I really enjoyed figuring out how things worked. I tried to take things apart. I tried to figure out how different mechanical things worked. To a certain extent, it was more electronics. But when I was in high school, I really enjoyed my physics class, how some of the math made sense, how you could actually see it. I realized later when I was in college that I liked the physical things that I could see, not necessarily the quantum mechanics. But in high school, there was a family friend who said, I think you're going to be a pediatrician. And I didn't know exactly what a pediatrician did. I enjoyed going to my own pediatrician, but it was like, really? You think I'm going to be a pediatrician? She was a high school math teacher and our families knew each other, but it was an interesting, but very...
It's called Inception. She just planted that seed there in your head. Do you know what she saw in you that said, oh, you're going to be a pediatrician? Were you like playing with other kids, taking care of anybody else or something like that?
Yeah. So when I first met this family, their kids were probably 4 and 6. And so I had interacted well with her kids and other kids. And so I think she saw something in me that noted the caring for others, but also the intellectual side and being able to bring those together and caring for others. It turns out pediatrics was a great fit for me.
So then you went to physics in college.
Mm-hmm.
No quantum mechanics, everything physical.
Well,
right.
So I had to take a semester of quantum mechanics and the electromagnetism and some of those things that it was like you hear about the Schrodinger's cat paradox of like, there's a cat in the box, and is the cat alive or is it not? And if you look in the box, then it might change. And it just was kind of mind-boggling to me. And I actually took organic chemistry that very same semester. And I just loved the problem solving, the memorize the equations. And part of it, the professor really worked well with my learning style. I like to write things out and really interact with it, as opposed to just watching it on the screen or reading the slides. So that really resonated with me and kind of confirmed, as did some research and volunteering experiences, that I was supposed to be a physician.
That's awesome. So then you went to medical school, and in medical school, there were tons of things to decide, no cats in a box, but, lots of medical mysteries. And what took you? How did you find pediatrics at that time? Like, probably that comment from that teacher resonated with you for so many years. You stuck with it. You're stuck with it right now. But did anything else attract you?
Yeah, so going through medical school, I did have my first and second year a preceptor who was a pediatrician. And so I got to see a little bit more. But really, until you're in the everyday rotations for 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks at a time, you don't have as much of a feeling of what is this specialty really about. And even that's barely enough time to decide. I was just thankful that I was kind of narrowing between pediatrics, internal medicine, pediatrics, combined training, and family medicine. And I was really thankful that my family medicine rotation was actually with a solo family doc who had her own clinic. And I got to really practice my Spanish, and just really was kind of really attractive to me. But then my pediatrics rotation, one of my mentors, he was internal medicine, pediatrics, double boarded. And he said, you really have to love the patient population and the common things that you're going to see in that group. And I realized I really enjoyed kids, but the part of talking to adults was also attractive to me. But I realized I loved kids, and I would have plenty of opportunity to talk to adults and their parents.
And now you have 2 kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
2 babies. How does that, how do you feel, as a parent, now that when you went to this as a pediatrician, you were not a parent yet, right? You decided this because you like to talk to children. Now you're a parent. And as a parent, has your sense of knowledge or responsibility or anything changed in the way that you feel as a pediatrician?
Absolutely. So I would go into my pediatrics career out of residency, and I still didn't have any kids. And I'd make these recommendations and these advice that I'd give. But now having children and saying, yes, the 1-month-old baby, they will be really gassy and they will be miserable. And I can say that from a place of, yes, I've been there. Or the toddler who's almost too long for their car seat, but they still need to be rear facing. Yes, I know it's hard. Or even having been through 2 miscarriages, now I can look at a newborn's history and see that mom may have had a loss and just be more sensitive. So it's really changed how I view my own practice and how I'm able to come alongside parents in a variety of different ways.
So now you've had some changes in your practice, right? Now you have that. You've also had other changes, not necessarily emotional related to your experiences as a parent, but also to experiences as a physician dealing with charting, right? That's what you're teaching these days. When you were in that rotation with that solo practitioner that you decided to become a pediatrician, she inspired you so much, and you practice your Spanish. Did you see her fighting, struggling with charting, or in any way, did you see anything that made you suspect there was something there that was a challenge for you in the future?
So from watching her, I didn't really see a whole lot of challenges or difficulty, but I think in medical school, I did my few notes per day, trying to focus on seeing patients and then getting my history and physical together. And I think I was so tunnel vision on what I needed to do that I didn't even realize that this was a stressor.
I think that's for all of us. All of us. Like we had the longest time to do a note at that time. It was so pretty. My handwriting was so beautiful at that time. It's like, oh my goodness, I have those notes. I have saved some of them. And these for, like so many over 20 years ago. And things have changed. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I was really thankful looking back that I at least had the opportunity. My first rotation of third year, I was able to do internal medicine at a place that still did paper charting in the hospital. So they had some electronic orders, but yeah, it was eye-opening to see, okay, you don't necessarily have the chart with you when the patient goes to surgery or to dialysis, but there's a certain amount of freedom in, it's like, I did my paper and I'm done.
Exactly. Yeah. But, people might not understand nowadays when I do my paper and done. So that's there's pros and cons. And now these days you have decided to teach efficiencies to doctors. You give certain tips about charting, having been through burnout. So tell us about that episode of burnout. Just a year out of residency, you were already suffering with burnout. Can you tell us what happened, your story during that year?
Yeah, so I ended up at the same clinic out of residency that I was in during residency. And so I thought, well, I know the system, I'll ramp up pretty quickly. So I got up even more quickly than others joining the system to my full capacity. And while that was great, and I felt like I was contributing, I was seeing patients, making a difference, the charts were piling up. I was having to free text a lot of notes. We actually transitioned medical record systems about 4 months in. And then I was doing notes in the evenings, on weekends, logging in from home where I couldn't be as efficient because the monitor was smaller and the connectivity was different. And 8 months out, I was just exhausted. My wife and I were sitting down and she said, something has to change. And she was right.
So how many hours were you charting at night after work? And how many patients were you seeing?
So I was probably seeing 15 to 20 a day, and some with interpreters, some with extra medical complexity that had transportation challenges. And maybe it wasn't reasonable to ask them to come back in a week, in a month for that additional problem-based visit. And so I was addressing their wellness topics along with whatever issues they brought to me. And so I was probably charting an additional 2 to 3 hours a night. And sometimes when I was exhausted, it was just overwhelming. And to think, am I going to stay late and miss dinner? Am I going to stay late and not be able to focus? Or do I need to go home and eat? And then I'm less efficient because now I'm at home, or I'm doing it on Saturday or Sunday. And it just made it hard to recharge.
And what thing was that spark or that initiating factor for you to get out of that burnout situation and then subsequently teach others about charting?
Mm-hmm. So when I realized I was burned out, I had done a stretch of 10 days in a row, doing a little bit of newborn nursery coverage, not thinking much of it because I had done way more than that at times throughout my medical training. But I realized, okay, I need to cut back a little bit. And so I ended up doing 8 sessions and got some training in how to build things within my medical record. And going to that training, it was offsite. It was a couple of days, and I went with a colleague. It was eye-opening to see that there was opportunities to do other things within medicine that could still make an impact and engage my brain in a different way.
So now you decided then to become an entrepreneur, teaching others, because that's a business now. Tell us about that transition for you once you discover, I can, I learned this thing. Now I'm coming out of my burnout because I'm going to be more efficient. I've seen these results, right? Because then you started like not missing dinners at home, having more time with your wife now that you were able to apply this knowledge that you had, and then you wanted to teach others. But you needed to register your business and get clients and do these things. Tell us about that transition, the things that you did, how it happened. When did your podcast come through this journey, and how you've been getting now, the business rolling, working, getting other physicians to follow you and to learn from you?
Yeah, so I had residents come work with me in clinic, and I would always ask them what they were thinking about doing for their career and just let them know my story about burnout and just the importance of prioritizing wellness. And then in July of 2021, I decided I want to talk to more than just these residents that are working with me, and had seen other physicians starting podcasts. And I said, I think I could do that. I'm an introvert, and I actually scripted out the entire first 8 episodes, typing it out, and I read it. I can definitely look back and see how, it sounds a little bit different in terms of my voice. And it's been fun to see how I've grown in confidence. Then I had seen others doing coaching and seeing how really things like charting are just neutral things. And the stress that I experienced was a result of some of the unconscious thoughts that I'd been thinking about. This is so hard, or I can't do this in this amount of time. And then being able to say, how can I bring some of that awareness to other physicians? It really resonated with me in a way that said, there are others doing this, but that means that there are so many that could really benefit from this kind of service.
So you talk about prioritizing wellness. Let's talk about a little bit, because one of the things, prioritizing wellness is like time for you, right? Now that you have children, besides having your wife, things change. Sleep, diet, stress, all those things have changed. Can you tell us how you have prioritized wellness, which strategies you're using in your own life?
Yeah, so I think for me, prioritizing wellness looks like putting some of those big things into my schedule first, whether it's saying I want to have at least this much sleep, or we're going to have certain meals that we're going to do, so that it's not having to make a decision about it every single time. And if I'm able to make some of those decisions in advance, then I can follow through on that more easily. So whether that's healthy eating or spending time with my family. And I'm a work in progress with little ones, and going through teething, the sleep, and the activity. Definitely, it's just rearranging priorities, but it can be a dynamic thing, but just trying to keep that top of mind.
And what have you talked to this newer generation, the new residents? What do you see in them? Do you see any differences? Even though, it wasn't really that long ago that you graduated as a pediatrician, compared to me, like I've been 20 years out of training. But have you seen a change in the way that they prioritize wellness versus the way that maybe your class was talking about that, if you guys were talking about it at all?
So in my class, we really didn't talk about it. They had us do one of those burnout inventories during maybe our second and third year retreat. And yeah, middle of second year, you're really, really struggling. And they reached out to some important people in our lives to have them write us like a note of encouragement. And that was helpful. But the long-term, how you want your career to look, we weren't really talking about that. But
and
then
what have the residents said now?
Many of them are much more attuned to that. I had one that came through, and we were swapping stories about, we both had infants, and this resident was considering a GI fellowship. And she said, I don't know that I really want to do that much intense fellowship training, which was apparently much more intensive inpatient and call heavy, with a young child. And they'd heard that other attending GI physicians were not having the flexibility to be able to go part-time, or I'm 0.85, 85%. They weren't able to do that with their call structure. And so this particular resident decided that general pediatrics would still afford them opportunities to engage and to contribute to patients, and yet be able to meet her priorities for her family. And so I was really proud of her for ending up doing that, even though I just had maybe 2 half days where, talking with her and one of the other residents, we said, there's other options out there. You get to choose. And if you do it intentionally up front, then you retain some of that flexibility rather than after you've been out for 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, thinking about my time when I was going through this process myself in terms of wellness and lifestyle and all these things, I remember specifically looking at the lives of the attendings, not only at work, all the things that inspire me, all the contact with the patient, all that, those relationships and the use of knowledge of medicine, but also how they were living their lives. However, I would not talk about that to anybody. Like, it wasn't something that you really would tell anybody, because maybe they would think that you were like lazy or weak or something like that, when I was really trying to achieve some sort of balance in my future life, thinking about, is there a career where I can still feel the excitement and apply all this knowledge that I'm learning and come home and then have a family? Allow me to do that. And that was one of the things, one of the things that really excited me was neurosurgery. And I loved the work of a neurosurgeon. And that was like my first love in medicine when I went to medical school, just, doing a burr hole, seeing that brain pulsating to me. That was like a moment that, a amazing moment, and all the things that I saw that they were doing. But then their lifestyle, really, they were miserable. And I'm sorry, like, I love you guys, neurosurgeons, and I respect all you do. And I know that you guys have done tons of sacrifices, but I really was more interested, besides that, in really having a family, which I've been able to achieve. And now, as an interventional pain physician all these years, and I was able to go back, like, an injury took me back into pain medicine myself, and pain management, not taking pain medicine, but being able to rotate through that specialty, and then do a lot of things that I would have done as a neurosurgeon with spinal work. So it was very interesting to me, but it was nothing that we would talk necessarily, because we would not want to be perceived as being lazy when we're trying to just look for that balance, prioritize what we want to achieve in life, not only be defined as a physician, but also being defined as, a person outside of medicine. And having all these other things, all these other efforts, is allowing us to do that, and having creativity and having outlets. That's what we're teaching, for example, entrepreneurship in our mastermind. You are teaching people how to do charting. What have you seen, the transformations that you're seeing in these physicians that you're teaching? Tell us about your transformation, how it really changed you. How did you feel personally? And what have others told you who have been through your program?
Yeah, so for me, having been through burnout, I realized it was largely a result of the charting. And initially, I thought it was just on optimizing the tools, getting my templates together, making it so that I could go from one room to the other, and reducing some of that friction of the going back to the workroom, having to log in there. But I realized as I went through my own coaching program for coach training that a lot of it was the thought work, what I was believing about myself, my charting, what I could do, what was possible for me. And so by working on both the tools and the mindset, I was able to see that I could be fully present with my patients, connect with them, still finish my charting probably 90% of the time in the room, and be able to stay about the same in terms of my schedule and flow throughout the day. And so that's really clicked for me in these last 6 months, and being able to get all of my things done, and then really led to the idea of, well, how can I really package that in a way that offers the opportunity to go through this transformation to others?
So you've been able to change two things, function and mindset. And I think like everything begins with mindset. And one would say, yeah, but you went like from being working on as a pediatrician, not only you're working as a pediatrician and now you're a parent, you also have a podcast and now you have a coaching business, and like it's more work. Do you feel that you have, do you feel like you have much more work? Are you able to balance your life? Do you think that your burnout episode, might be recurrent with now having so much work with all these other three things that are happening?
I think that's certainly a risk, and something that, as I've been both going through my training program and now building my business, that I've had to keep an eye on. And it's been helpful to have my wife speak into that. I was going to do my initial launch back in August, and she told me, "You're doing too much." I did my initial webinar and everything, was about to open the cart, and she said, "You need to pause." And so I did. And so I'm getting ready right now to do my first launch again, and just seeing the difference in terms of my bandwidth to be able to do that has been really insightful for me as I want to encourage other people with wellness. But I have a few things that have enabled me to do it this time. So back in August, I was doing it all on my own. And now I have a virtual assistant who's helped me with some of the graphics creation, doing more of the podcast editing and uploading. It's really helped me see that, just like in medicine, I can't do it all myself. I don't room the patients. I don't get the vaccines. We're a team. And so by bringing someone else on, I've seen the real value in just how life is about being interdependent. And so it's just been a good reminder for me as I go into that first launch again soon.
Yeah, I think I see many people who want to like leave medicine, right? And when we're doing all these efforts, when you're burnout, that's like your first thought is get rid of the pain, right? So you think that getting rid of the pain is going to be getting rid of the medicine. And then as physicians go through this burnout work, and they find other outlets to be able to control the situation, being able to explore their creativity and allow that to be exposed and be fruitful, you find that most of us really want to stay working as physicians. But one thing that people have to realize is when you're doing these other things, entrepreneurship and all this stuff, that has its own set of skills. You have to develop teams, and there's, financial risk there. There's time risk. There is failure also that could happen. So you really have to prepare for that and take it as seriously as you would have, for example, been, taking medicine. So you took medicine seriously as a career. So these other things, for them to be successful, they have to be taken seriously. Not necessarily that you're going to be, having more work is going to be a lot of stress, but it's work still. And you have to create business plans and register your companies and create teams like you're doing right now. And then going through that investment of time, effort, and putting all those things there. And you've gone through that. Right now, you're going through the two things, like your podcast and releasing your coaching business. Right now, I know I've seen you being coached in one of our, we belong to these groups. It's called LGA. That's Leverage and Growth Accelerator. And we are very fortunate for physician entrepreneurs. And we get to be coached by our colleagues. And I've seen you being coached, and I've seen the transition of, these beliefs and believing that is possible and becoming aware of your thoughts. And it's amazing to see physicians who you would not think, outside of medicine could be this vulnerable, just going through the work like anybody else would, right? And eliminating these barriers. How was that for you being coached in a group?
So it's really a pretty vulnerable experience, just knowing that I'm getting this opportunity, and it's definitely a privilege. But then if you stop and think about it too long, it's like, oh, there's all these other people watching me, hearing about what I'm struggling with or going through. And yet, as I have heard other people be coached and see them go through things, not only does it help me see that I'm not the only one going through that, but it also just reminds me that this is part of how I grow. And whether it's presenting a patient on rounds or doing my history and physical and submitting it so that as a first or second year, one of the fourth year medical students is grading it. And I thought, oh, wow, it's like they're giving me all this feedback and it's intimidating, or it's like, I could never write one like this. And then you just take those next steps. And I think what you said about having a community is so crucial. It's been huge for me to say, all right, there's others who may be asking questions that I've dealt with before, starting a podcast, forming my LLC, getting my outside services agreement together with my employer. And yet opportunities to get coached and people who are steps farther ahead from me, it's really inspiring.
That's awesome. It's been quite a change, quite a journey in terms of entrepreneurship. It's I was talking to another physician about the medical mindset and then the entrepreneurship mindset. And then I was talking to somebody else, a very close person to me. And we're talking about what do these things mean to different people. And like the medicine mindset, where you're being a doctor and you have no break, right? Like you have to get it right, or somebody is going to either not improve in their situation, or their situation can get way worse, and that can mean even death, right? So you have very little room to move. And we go through that mindset of medicine where this is it. And then going to entrepreneurship, there is some more window, some more flexibility, and you have to understand where that flexibility is. And you can relate that to either fixed mindset, like calling that medicine mindset, being a fixed mindset, because you have to be that way. Otherwise, people could be harmed. And then growing into these places where you say, like we have to be vulnerable, we have to be growing. And that growth mindset at times is really not, let's say, we're not taught that in that way. But if we make relationships, like you said, this is the same way, like when you were in those rounds. I remember being in rounds, and I remember being, feeling ashamed of not knowing something. And we all have different ways of expressing that, right? And I remember feeling so ashamed of not knowing this particular question in front of a group. I remember being in the ICU with patients, very critically ill, and not knowing one simple question, or just getting nervous about it. And everybody's there looking at you, what are you going to say now? And it's like, and then once they give the answer, it's like, I knew that, I knew that, but you just get so nervous, and like you're there, and then that. But it makes you grow. It's like, next time I'm not going to be in that situation where I'm just so stressed, or so I just like relax, and then just bring that from the back of your head, because there's somebody's life is at stake. So we go through that. Coaching is very important. Being in the right groups is very important for us to grow, and recognizing what's a priority in your life so that you can make change. Still, knowing all these things, you can still go through burnout, right? So getting to the right groups, recognizing the problem is going to be the very first thing. If you were going to tell somebody about the priorities in your life, now that they've, being readjusted, what would you tell people those are?
Yeah, for me, I'd say, especially as I reflected on like my journey through grief and loss and burnout, I realized that faith, family, and friends, and those are some of the biggest things that, if everything in medicine was taken away, or it's like it could change. And we saw with the pandemic that it's like things like secure employment, it can all change. And yet those things, those connections that we build can really be a huge support of how do I make sense of this world? Who's important to me? And what are those connections in the community? It's really been helpful to step back and say, there's something more important, that ability to be present with the patient, to sit with them and to say, I don't know your grief, but I know that grief is hard, or that some of these anniversaries and things where, yeah, it's just really been eye-opening for me to say, okay, who I am, like I get to bring all of that to the exam room, and to say my priorities being realigned can help me be a better physician.
So let's call it the 3 F's of Ryan Stegink, right? Faith, family, and friends. Those are your 3 F's. And those, we all have our 3 things. And that's really important that you've identified those. And now you're guiding your life for that. And then you learn what to say no to, and what you learn to say what, yes to. Let's talk about one tip for our listeners if they want to learn about effectiveness on charting. You talked about optimizing tools, optimizing your templates, trying to minimize your logging time. But what would that be one thing that allows you to finish 90% of your charts in the room?
I think the biggest thing for me was realizing that you can work through the discomfort of change, whether that's charting in the room at all. Some people think, oh, I can't connect if I am charting while I'm talking to the patient. It's charting anything in the room can be helpful, and that can be uncomfortable. For me, it was initially that I wanted to get out of the room and go to the next one because I was already a few minutes behind. And yet taking that moment to say, I put in all your orders. I'm going to finish your note really quick and make sure that I remember the pertinent exam findings or the specific things I counseled you on, rather than just putting in, oh, this was what I normally counsel someone that has asthma or eczema, what I counsel them about. And so sitting with that discomfort of, I want to leave the room, I don't want to chart. Sitting with that discomfort will give you the ability to grow in whatever way makes sense for you where you're at right now.
And now one tip for those who want to become entrepreneurs, having that transition from a physician to an entrepreneur, things that you might say, you know what, I didn't think about this before, but this is what I would do now.
Yeah, I think for me, it was probably the delegation. And I think we may have even talked about this when you came on my podcast, and I wasn't there yet. And yet listening, I've been a part of James Wedmore's community, and he has a little mini course on how to hire somebody and how to delegate. And while I've done it in medicine, it's realizing that some of these skills and experiences that I've had in one context, I need to apply in this one. So learning to delegate and learning to manage, to give feedback, and to be okay with this is adequate. It may not be exactly how I'd want it, but it's done and it's out there, kind of like the notes. It needs to be sufficient, but it doesn't have to be how I would have done it as a third-year medical student doing my full history and physical, how it was as a resident when I only had 3 to 5 patients per session rather than 10. And so being okay with that, but learning how to delegate and how to entrust others to build that team, I think is the biggest lesson that I've been learning lately in entrepreneurship.
Well, I saw your Instagram and I love the picture that you have where you're on PJs and then asking people about, like, where do you want to chart, right? Do you want to chart at home in your PJs, or and you can say, oh, that's comfortable and stuff. But, It's nighttime. Like, do you really want to be charting when you're supposed just to be wearing your PJs and be with your family or time to sleep? Who took the picture and whose idea was it to post? And who posted it? Did you post it? What the process of going through that picture? Because I loved it.
Thanks. Yeah, I actually came up with that particular idea myself and was able to use a stand that I was able to clamp to the bed frame, and just recorded it right in the app and posted it pretty quickly. So I was thinking about potentially making it kind of an alter ego type of Dr. PJ in the PJs. But I realized that might be more confusing if people were thinking, where's this Dr. PJ? And it's like, no, I'll just be me, but kind of make it lighthearted. And so I may reprise that in the future with particular charting tips. So it's gotten pretty good engagement so far.
Yeah, well, hopefully more can see it. So let's talk about where people can see. Let's talk about, tell people how they can find you on that Instagram account, also about your podcast and about your courses coming up, right?
Absolutely. Thanks. Yeah. So I'm at MedEdWell.com. And so it's education about wellness and medicine. So MedEdWell, and
MedEdWell is MEDEDWELL.
Yep, .com. Same handle for Instagram, and Ryan Stegink, RYAN, and STEGINK. So Instagram and LinkedIn are probably the best places on social media to find me. And the group charting course, group coaching, is a Charting Mastery, and it's at CHARTING Mastery, MASTERY.net. So I look forward to inviting you to join me. And if it's between launches, you're welcome to join the wait list, and I'd be happy to connect you with other resources and let you know when the next time I'll be launching.
There you go, guys. If you want to finish your charts at least 90% of the time in the room, you can go and listen, join this course coming up in Charting Mastery with Dr. Ryan Stegink. And if you don't want to miss those PJs, I love that picture. Maybe you'll do one in PJs with your kids, like you want to be charting or you want to be your kids in PJs. Go to his Instagram account. Thank you for being here, Ryan. It's been wonderful to listen to your story, inspiration. And, burnout can happen just as quick as 1 year, within 1 year out of your residency, all the way to 20 years, being out of residency. It can happen at any time. You guys have solutions. You have options. Ryan has found his solution actually in entrepreneurship, as well as in being more efficient with charting. And go ahead, listen to other physicians, listen to this podcast. And if you want, I invite you to listen to episode number 46 of the MedEdWell podcast, where I was guest and we talked about some of these things in entrepreneurship. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you the next time.
Thanks so much.
Well, guys, that's it for today. Stay tuned for more of our Design Your Physician Life podcast, which was brought to you today by your Max Allure Mastermind, which is an exclusive personal and professional development program for physicians who want to learn about entrepreneurship. We will continue to bring you useful resources to develop your physician entrepreneur life, like we did today with Dr. Ryan Stegink. If you want to find more about him, please visit his website, MedEdWell, MedEdWell.com. He also has his website, Ryan Stegink, RyanStegink.com, and he has Charting Mastery coming up. Thank you for joining us. We hope you had a great time as we did. Stay in touch with us. Visit our website, maxallure.com, MAXALLURE. Please don't forget to subscribe, like us, give us 5 stars, and share the love with your friends and family. See you later. Thanks. Bye.
Please remember that Design is not providing specific financial, medical, or career advice. Our only intent is to stimulate your appetite for growth by sharing our experience and those of our speakers, coaches, and guests. Your personal growth and success will be unique to your circumstances and your hard work. We sincerely hope you enjoyed the show and look forward to seeing you next week.